Welcome to the Inside Eco Devo podcast, where we highlight economic development happening in the state of Missouri. I'm your host, Eric Thurman, with the Missouri Department of Economic Development. On this episode, we're speaking with Marcie Lawson. She is the president and CEO of the Sikeston Chamber Economic Development Tourism. Marcie, welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I think you are, if I'm not mistaken, we've done a number of episodes, but I think you're our first, I would just say, kind of partner, kind of economic development cohort kind of individual that's outside the bubble of DED proper. So we're kind of excited to get your perspective on economic development from a side that isn't within state government.
Great. Well, I feel honored.
But let's kind of start with Sikeston, the Chamber Economic Development Tourism. Kind of give us the spiel of who you guys are, what you do, what's going on.
Sure. So about 10 years ago, our community leaders recognized the need for collaboration in our community. We're a smaller community in Southeast Missouri. So the city of Sikeston actually contracts with the Chamber of Commerce to perform economic development and tourism activities. So right now we are kind of three different entities under one roof. My primary responsibility is economic development, and I'm building a regional team to incorporate 3 local counties so that we're doing economic development on a regional level, but still keeping that hometown feel for our chamber and our tourism dollars.
You're talking about these 3 different areas. Kind of give us an idea of the kind of work that's going on. I mean, you kind of gave us the high-level view there, but maybe some nuance to it there to kind of give the listeners an idea of the work that's going down.
Sure. So when I break down economic development to its simplest form, I think of bringing in tax dollars to our community. So that can be our local government, our county government, now this 3-county region that we're working with. And if you look at what a chamber does and what tourism does, both of those things are vital for the economic health of a community. So it really works well that we're all collaborating and working together as we're building out the way that we want our community to grow in the future.
Are there, here in DED, we have, a myriad of programs, tax incentives, and such. Do you guys have programs like that people, business or maybe individuals can kind of apply for to get involved? Or are you guys tackling it a little bit different?
We probably are tackling it a little bit differently and relying on you as the state leaders to then lead into the incentive programs that we have. So when we get to that point in our recruiting industry, we definitely have, the incentives, the tax break incentives and those kind of things. A lot of our programming is probably more closely related to what a typical chamber would do. And really the way that I look at it, it's building community leaders. So we have a really great Leadership Sikeston program. We have a great Sikeston Young Professionals program. So some of those more traditional chamber type programming that if you're not working toward it, you're not going to have an economy to build on to offer any of those incentives because you don't have any leaders in your community.
I would imagine most of our listeners are within the economic development bubble in some way or form. So they're probably familiar with a chamber and all its nuances. But for those who aren't, can you kind of give us, you've given us a little bit already, but why a chamber, why each area has a chamber, the importance of it? Because a listener might be going, well, we have DED at the state level. Couldn't they just do it? Why are there all these other different chambers? Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think us coming together and recognizing the need and benefit to do economic development as a region, but keep the autonomy with the chamber really makes a lot of sense. So when I think of what does our local chamber do, well, we do what our community needs us to do, our business community specifically. So we want to be the leader in that. A great example is when COVID hit. No longer was I providing networking opportunities. Nobody was getting together for luncheons. We weren't having business after hours. So what was I to the community? Well, I was their source of information and jumping on all of the national calls from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, and then I was filtering that and sending it out to our businesses to say, here's what you need to know right now as a business, because they are still trying to hold on for dear life. At the same time, we're reaching out and we switched our Facebook engagement to really support our local restaurants. And here's who has what. available. Here's who's doing drive-through. We worked with our community leaders to be able to sell alcoholic beverages out of a window. Everybody's cooped up inside. So what can I do to make sure that my businesses are strong and healthy?
One of my questions was going to be, do you have any stories that kind of put stuff into context? So yeah, great. Maybe there's some other stories we can dive into that kind of gives context to, maybe the breadth of what Chamber can do. However, let's talk a little bit about partnerships. Does the Sikeston Chamber, collaborate, partner with DED? Has it done in the past? If so, how has that looked and how does that function for you guys?
As I mentioned, the city of Sikeston collaborates directly with the chamber to perform economic development duties. So I'm partnering with the chamber, yes, and the chamber board. We also have an economic development board. But then we've built that out to be a true private-public partnership. And again, expanding that into our regions. So it really is definitely a collaboration and a partnership. I do a little bit at our annual awards banquet for the chamber and give an economic development update. I do the same thing at luncheons. It's kind of that cross share of information and then really utilizing everyone's skills so everyone doesn't have to be excellent at everything. If someone else is better at marketing, okay, great. Do marketing for chamber, economic development, and tourism. It's been more of a partnership than probably a typical chamber and economic development partnership would be. That's worked to our benefit because then there's not competition. There's not that, well, the small businesses are mine and the big businesses are mine. It really has facilitated just smooth transition. And at the end of the day, it's what's best for the Sikeston region.
How do you see that the work of the Department of Economic Development, the state agency of DED, and that could be any number of ways, like whether it's incentives that we have that you guys can take a part of, or we get federal dollars for ARPA and things of that nature that we filter out as people apply for them and whatnot. Can you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. So Missouri DED has been an excellent partner for us. I love the restructure and the regional engagement team. They're my lifeline down there in Southeast Missouri. Leslie Roan has been a great asset to me, really keeping me connected with what's going on in the state level. So we have taken advantage of several of your programs, notably the ARPA grant program. Love the way that came through DED, the ease of the application, but almost the forced collaboration really allowed us to be successful. As the Sikeston community, we received $9.3 million in ARPA grant funded programs, and that's really a big deal when you're talking about a small rural community. One of my favorite new things is Missouri One Start's credentialing program and the flexibility realized within that programming to upskill some of our employees that don't fit into that traditional Missouri One Start programming has been really well received from our local industry and small business leaders.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Can you talk about some of the economic challenges that you guys face in the Sikeston area? I mean, I would imagine Missouri as a whole probably faces a lot of similar things, but each area is probably a little different from, Kansas City's probably not the same as Sikeston and so on and so forth. So can you touch base on a little bit of what you guys are working through challenge-wise?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is workforce development and keeping our young people here or wanting to move back to Sikeston. I think that's something that all rural communities face, or at least most of them do. The big thing is that we need to be doing something to work toward it. We can't just hope that people come here. So we have kind of replicated our successful Leadership Sikeston program and took it into the high school. So we have a great program called Students Observing Area Resources, or SOAR. And so we have a couple of different tracks with our SOAR program, but essentially we've got those students who are likely to go to college. They've been supported. They're going to have, scholarship opportunities. Please, by all means, go somewhere, go to college, but recognize that when you're getting into your professional life, coming back to Sikeston and building on the relationships that your parents have or you've already started to build is going to get you a leg up rather than going to the big city, Dallas, Washington, anything like that. Is people are going to know your name and they're going to build on the reputation that you already have. So that's one of our tracks, and bringing back some of those people who are going to go into professional jobs because we need those, and they're going to become our Sikeston Young Professionals and then right into Leadership Sikeston. Then we've also worked with our Sikeston Career and Tech Center and the block classes. So those students have already shown an interest in the trades, welding, construction, healthcare, childcare, and we're taking those students and bringing them into the community so they can see what different job opportunities are available in their specific field where they're already interested, and start building those relationships for them, saying, here, in 6 months, I'm going to hand you, 20 students that are ready to go to work. That's been a really great way to connect our business community with our students and get those people right out of high school engaged in our workforce.
Now, are these tracks geared towards open and available job markets that are in the Sikeston area, or are you guys at the same time trying to build those jobs while skilling up the workforce to fill it?
Sure. That program is designed to fill the slots that are already open. We will upskill them and train them as they become adults, but we want them to get working right as they're used to going to school every day at 8 o'clock. Okay, now get used to going to work at 8 o'clock or whatever time, and not have that gap where we seem to lose students. Definitely childcare is a huge issue for rural Missouri. I can't say anything for across the state, but I can tell you the 3 counties that we're working in, every single one of them has recognized that childcare is no longer just a woman's issue, but it is a true workforce issue. Every day I've got people saying, either I can't find childcare, I lost an employee because of childcare, what am I going to do when we have a child? So that is something that is not easy to address in a rural area, and we are partnering with the state and local folks who are saying, yes, we recognize this as a workforce issue and we're going to get behind it.
Yeah, that's a topic that has come up a couple of times in the Missouri Leadership Program. I won't speak to what Missouri Leadership is, but it's upcoming leaders trying to find solutions for problems across the state. And childcare is one that has come up a couple of times. So yeah, it's a statewide issue. It'll be interesting what kind of solutions that can be found there. Mm-hmm. In that vein, do you guys have an idea of solutions that you're leaning towards?
We're really trying to look at outside the box solutions. We've got a major employer that's a local employer, has built up to 500 or 600 employees. The owner's son right now has 4 children under 8, so he's feeling that pinch and is really interested in what could we do to help. Is that the child care workers become employees of the industry so that they can receive benefits as an industrial employee would, rather than a child care employee that really, it's a small business and competitive wages, and that person's just trying to keep an affordable child care option open. So things like that. Is there a way to partner with our university, Southeast Missouri State University down there? Is there a way to partner with our K-12 program? If we've got a child care program, how can we get more students into that so that they can accept more kiddos into their program? So we're looking at a variety of different ways. I don't know what that's going to look like, but hopefully we'll be working on that later on this year.
Besides the workforce and the child care, anything else we need to touch on?
No, everything else is perfect.
Oh, everything else is perfect. Great.
I'm just kidding. No, something I'll be talking about a little later this evening is we're at a unique time and place where we've got a federally designated interstate with I-57 identified at the federal level. So then how do we coordinate at the local level and the state level to make sure that future I-57 gets funded and that our community is ready for it? So there's some at-grade crossings we're going to have to close, which means we have to build some outer roads. So Sikeston is trying to be very progressive in this point in time because it will put us at the crossroads of I-57 and I-55. And we know that will bring growth. So that means we've got to prepare our port system, our ferries, our workforce, all of these things, because we know that companies are looking at logistics and looking at that carbon footprint. And we know that we want to be the community leaders and where they want to come when that happens.
Yeah, something that gets talked about a lot when it comes to Missouri, and especially with economic development, is how Missouri is in the kind of geographically centered in the United States.
Yeah.
We have waterways, we have airways, we have highways, all major stuff kind of intersecting with, 8 states that border us. I think we're one.
Please don't make me name them.
Yeah, I wouldn't put you
I used to be able to do that.
But, I mean, when it comes to shipping, logistics,
Mm-hmm.
economic development, and all that stuff, we're kind of prime in that location. And Sikeston having waterways and the highways coming together, like you said, I'm sure that's big for you guys.
It really is. And what we found is that we've got manufacturing jobs and logistics jobs, or manufacturing that needs strong logistics. And that's kind of our target. That's what we've been seen as doing very well. And we know that that will only increase as this Future 57 comes and as we partner with our 3-county area to really strengthen all of our industrial sites.
Speaking of industries and whatnot, Southeast Missouri, and I could get this wrong because we have 6 different regions, and I'm not the expert in any of them, but I believe Southeast, a lot of mining goes down there. They had, I believe, the big smelting plant that closed, I believe. When it comes to, and I haven't heard about it in a bit, so maybe it's not as prevalent as it was a year or so ago, but like the CHIPS Act and getting materials for that whole initiative and whatnot. Can you speak to that kind of industry a little bit? And I'll throw a side question at you, and hopefully this doesn't get too convoluted, but when you have farmland and wide open spaces, there's the chance for mega sites and things of that nature. Can you just kind of touch upon some of that when it comes to economic development?
Sure. So the 3 counties that I work with, and Sikeston in particular, is very flat. So a lot of that mining is actually adjacent to us, but we want to be prepared for having some of those or seeking out those industries that will service those mining industries. So I doubt we'll have any of those mining industries locating in my particular footprint, but knowing that they're going to have logistical needs or other down the line secondary, tertiary industries that would then support that mining operation, that's kind of what we're looking for. And then you bring up a really interesting thought on the mega sites. So yes, we have a lot of good flat farmland. Putting that all together with a couple of different property owners seems to be a little bit of a challenge, but not one that I'm not willing to take on. We've got a lot of growth-minded farmers and producers who are really saying, how am I going to leave my footprint on this community? And if it is by giving up some of my farmland for a mega site that will help provide jobs for decades and generations to come, they're opening up in a way that we really haven't seen in the past, and that's very exciting.
Okay, interesting. Some interesting opportunities.
Sabash, do not call me tomorrow.
So we've talked about challenges, not harp on, maybe not say negative.
Look,
but
not everything's perfect, but I'm a glass half full kind of person. If you want me to talk about different challenges, I'm happy to.
Oh, no, we can talk about challenges all day, but I figured we want to spotlight the good, right? So can you talk about some recent economic wins that you guys have had in the Sikeston area?
Yes. So very easily can speak about Carlisle Construction Materials coming to Sikeston, Missouri. That was such a huge win for our area. And that is the, manufacturing facility that needs strong logistics. And one of the reasons that they chose to locate in our area was because they knew Future 57 is coming and they're ready because a lot of their market is in Texas and South. And even though they've got the same exact plant in Dallas, they're still shipping a lot of their product to Texas. So we know that that was a big win for Sikeston. And then our ARPA projects were a huge win for us. We had a tourism asset project. We had a couple of different community development projects. We had 2 huge workforce development projects in our area. So, I mentioned $9.3 million to Sikeston alone, but also if you're looking at the Tri-County area that I've been speaking of, Mississippi County got another $3 million workforce development grant through that program. So those are huge wins for us, and it's getting some of that state energy and excitement in Southeast Missouri in a way that I have not seen since I've been in this role. Yeah,
when the ARPA stuff was happening, we had... I used to know the numbers off the top of my head. I want to say 14 stops or something. Anyway,
that was us. You came.
Yeah, we went across. We went to Carlisle.
Everybody sweated.
Yeah.
Were you there?
I was there.
Oh.
Yeah. It was.
Just be glad you don't have any hair. Everybody's hair was like melted.
Well, I mean, for the listeners, to put it into perspective, it was probably 90-something degrees outside. It was cooler outside than it was inside. Yes. It was quite interesting. And then you guys had the rodeo museum, and we were out there in the park. Yes. I know you guys were renovating some stuff. I'm not speaking very accurately, but I'm sure you can. But the point I'm coming to is when you have a business like Carlisle coming in, at the same time you're renovating like the downtown kind of museum area. Can you talk about what that kind of does, not just for, hey, we got this big business, but, and I could be wrong, but wasn't there something with MoDOT, you guys had to do something, or Carlisle had to do something with the road so the trucks could come in? That business coming in led to a road improvement, which probably leads to something else, which leads to something else. That kind of trickle effect of economic development inadvertently causing other great things to happen. I'm sure you guys have seen that with those kind of projects, probably more. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. And I think it comes back to that collaborative effort that we were talking about before. I mean, yes, Sikeston Economic Development can lead some of those efforts, but without the state, without the county, without the Delta Regional Authority, getting some grant funding from that, we would not have been able to put in the infrastructure to support Carlisle Construction Materials. So that was such a huge win. We got additional infrastructure dollars to support that, put in a new overpass, widen a 4-lane, put in a new signal. All of that is very expensive, and it's hard to have one local community foot that entire bill. So that was a huge collaborative win. And then when I think about, how did that economic development win trickle over into everything else, sometimes it's hard to really explain what economic development is. Everybody sees it as that huge, big splash, Carlisle is here, site selection, and that's it. What that allowed me in that whole event that you were talking about, from going to the grand opening of Carlisle to the ARPA project promotion that we had in the park, was to tie it all together. So to say, look at these big wins that we've gotten from Carlisle coming here, but also look at what your community is doing by investing millions of dollars into their own downtown, but maximizing those dollars by taking advantage of some state programming so that we can have a healthy and vibrant community for the management team that Carlisle Construction Materials brought in to our community and continue to thrive. So it's sometimes hard to say, well, how does, bringing in a rodeo museum and redoing your downtown really relate to economic development? And that particular opportunity gave us this perfect platform.
I think you're touching upon something there that kind of comes up every now and then, that, your average citizen doesn't see behind the curtain. They don't really see all the work that takes place to bring a business like Carlisle to the community. They just see, hey, the business is here, now there's jobs, or hey, there's a new museum, or the downtown's got better sidewalks or whatnot. They don't see all the stuff that leads up to that. So in that vein, what kind of feedback have you guys received from communities and or businesses when these developments happen?
I think our business leaders are appreciative that the community leaders are putting skin in the game themselves, if you will. So we're not relying on just the private industries to invest into downtown or invest in expanding or bringing their business here, but they're saying that the community itself is choosing to invest in itself. Same thing, the same time we were recording Carlisle, same time as COVID, we passed 2 bond issues to improve our school districts. Communities who are not focused on growth can't do that, and they're not choosing to do that. So it really was great to hear from our community leaders saying, hey, we want to invest in ourselves so that our business leaders can continue to invest in us as well.
When it comes to economic development, and maybe Carlisle is a good example of this question, but what does it take to be successful in economic development in Sikeston? What does success look like in Sikeston?
I think those are a little bit 2 different questions, so I'm going to answer the first one first. The first thing is you have to be prepared. Nobody is just dying to come to rural Missouri. I might think it's the latest and greatest place to live, and I choose to live there, and I choose to raise my family there, and I absolutely love it. But when you're selling that to someone else, it's a little bit more difficult. So what do you have to do? You have to be prepared. You have to have a site. You can't bring a company to the area if you do not have a place for them to go. So our community leaders did a great job of identifying a site, having it under our city control so that we can then use that as a negotiating tool when we're working with our site selectors or with Missouri Partnership and Missouri DED. Then we take advantage of every opportunity that's given to us. So we have to submit those sites for site selection. We have to go through Missouri Partnership's Missouri Certified Site Program. We have to take advantage of everything coming through Missouri DED so that we can get the utilities there to the best of our ability. And we're not overextending our local tax base. So the biggest thing is be prepared. Part of that, too, is working with our existing industries to make sure they're prepared. Economic development in a rural area can kind of be threatening to your existing employers. So educating them on here are some ways that you can be more successful and you can continue to grow. At the same time saying, hey, this is really what's best for the entire community. So we had several different industry plant manager leaders on the phone while we were recruiting Carlisle saying, bring it on, let's do it. You strengthen the workforce, we're going to strengthen it too. So that is something that is huge and I think somewhat unique to Sikeston.
And then that follow-up question, what does success look like for you guys?
Economic success looks different for everyone. So we want to say, well, what does that look like here? We would love for Carlisle Construction Materials to rip off and duplicate and do it all over again. But what I think we've realized is that what's good for Sikeston is good for New Madrid, is good for Charleston. So let's have one of them get the next big win. We'll focus on, making sure that we've got housing, that we've got workforce, that we've got these ancillary things that have to come along with economic success. But, let's strengthen some of those regional sites so that we've got more opportunities and more ways that we can say, hey, Southeast Missouri is where you want to come.
I have a kind of an oddball kind of side question that just came up in my mind. It kind of triggered when you were saying that, sometimes a business might go, oh, wow, what is all this economic development? Is this good for us? What are you guys doing? When it comes to a place like Sikeston, the rural lifestyle, the kind of community that has, different than, St. Louis, densely urban and whatnot. Do you ever get feedback where, you might hear, hey, we don't want to do too much. We don't want to change the way it is down here. If we do too many businesses, there's too many people, and then our atmosphere is different, our culture is different. Do you guys ever run into something like that? Is that kind of in the discussions at all?
I think that was in the discussions. Thankfully, since I've been kind of on the scene, if you will, that mindset is kind of going away. I think there's more buy-in from our community leaders saying, hey, if we want to grow, we know we have to change. It doesn't mean that we won't still be us. And again, that's why we want to have a strong chamber. That's kind of the fabric of our community. But we do have to say it might look a little bit different, and that might be okay. And so I'm hearing more feedback like that. That might also be because I pretty much shut down any feedback that's not like that. They don't really come at me with those anymore. But no, to say that there's not some of that, absolutely. We're a small town. There are some people who want it to be the way that it's always been. But those who are really actively putting their money where their mouth is, their time and their efforts into growth, see the benefits of a little bit of change, a little bit of expansion that will ultimately be the reason that we win.
Switching gears a bit, bid talk that's happening around our department is the development of CEDS, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. So we're developing a statewide one. As I understand it, many communities and whatnot have their local version. Does Sikeston have their local CEDS? How does that operate for you guys if you do? And how do you foresee a statewide version of that benefiting you guys?
So Sikeston itself is part of the Boot Hill Regional CEDS. So I believe that's 6 counties that come together and put together their CEDS. The top areas of focus in those CEDS for almost every community is agriculture and distribution. So no surprise there. It's what we're good at. It's what we are focused on. And how does that play into the statewide CEDS? It's just to remind everyone that agriculture is our number one industry in Southeast Missouri, and not agriculture maybe the way that some folks think about it, but really the traditional row crop. And everything in our area is linked to agriculture. When you talk about our economic assets, so road, river, rails, all of it facilitated by agriculture. We've got our tractor distributors. We've got, even the folks giving to the local YMCA, I promise you, are probably their major donors are farmers. All of that is wrapped into agriculture. So we've tried to embrace that a little bit more and be more proactive at the state level to say, hey, agriculture is so important to Missouri. Row crop is so important to Southeast Missouri.
And to give listeners a little bit of context, I'm sure they're probably tired of hearing it if they're following this podcast at all, because we've done a couple of episodes on CEDS already. But when you guys have your plan, however that's built for you guys, how do you guys actually implement it? How do you actually use it? Because I'm sure a listener is thinking CEDS, okay, you guys got a bunch of data and you put some kind of, booklet together. How does that facilitate economic development? How do you guys use your plan to your benefit?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to use it when applying for grants. So to say, hey, we have stopped thought about what we want to do. We've collected data that will help us make those decisions. And then this is part of our SEDS development plan. So when we're not just saying, oh, we want to plop a street right here. No, it makes sense to put that there because here is going to be the growth of our community based on the data. So that's primarily how I have been using it.
What's on the horizon for you guys? We've talked about challenges. We've talked about wins. What's the future look like for you guys?
I think the future looks like stronger collaboration within our communities. So I've talked a lot about our 3-county region. I think we then build partnerships with other regional economic development organizations. I think we partner with our local communities to strengthen their chamber of commerce. We talk with them about tourism options, how we have collaborated and made that work for us. You're not going to see just a stronger Sikeston, but a stronger Southeast Missouri. Anything
coming up on the horizon that you can talk about? I know a lot of things are hush-hush when business deals aren't done and all that, but anything coming up on the horizon where Team DED is going to be back into Sikeston to celebrate?
So by the time this airs, you will probably have heard that Unilever has a new name. I don't know what that is, so really you can poke or prod me. I don't know what that is going to be, but Unilever Ice Cream is our largest employer in Sikeston. It employs about 800 people, but they continue to invest and grow in our area. So with that change, they are expecting another expansion, and with that may come additional ancillary services that they need and hopefully will want to build out right there in my community.
Okay, so the Unilever in your area, their primary focus is like ice cream?
Their only focus is ice cream.
That's an interesting company because the Unilever here in Jeff City, they had just got, it's been a little while now, but the liquid IV packets, they're starting to do that here. Right. So what an interesting company that they have such diverse amount of things that they produce. That's really interesting. I think we've covered quite a lot. We've talked a nice wide breadth of economic development when it comes to Sikeston. Anything that we didn't touch upon that you want to call out and make sure listeners know about?
If I could say it just bluntly, is that we're not a bunch of hicks down there. You know, we've got a lot of educated, amazing community leaders in Southeast Missouri, and it's fun to share it with the state.
Well, Marcie, thank you so much for coming in and giving us all this information. We've been wanting to get outside partners on and get their perspective, so it's great to hear all of this, and hopefully the listeners got something out of it as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited about this too. I think as a listener, it's something I'll definitely be interested in, and seeing what my counterparts across the state are doing really well and seeing how we can learn from them.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Inside Eco Devo. We have great episodes coming your way every 2 weeks, so be sure to subscribe. Also, we want to hear from you, our listeners. Tell us what economic development topics you want to hear more about. This helps us fulfill our motto of helping Missourians prosper by bringing content to our listeners that they want to hear. Leave a comment on an episode or send an email to ded.communications@ded.mo.gov and stay tuned for more Inside Eco Devo.